You are listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. On this episode, we are discussing Mutual Friend, track 1 from the 1994 release I'd Rather Be Flag Burning, whose 10-inch vinyl came out on Recess Records and CD came out on the G7 Welcoming Committee. And the split, of course, features both Propaganda and I Spy.
You know what's so weird is I was looking at the Discogs listing for this release, and Mutual Friend is not listed on the track listing of the vinyl version on Discogs. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense to me. Why is this song not listed? And then I started to second guess my own sanity, and I had to go in the other room and I had to get out my vinyl copy of Flag Burning and play it just to make sure that I wasn't making it up, that this song was on that 10-inch. So I put on the 10-inch and there it was, but I have no idea why, but this song is not actually listed on the vinyl listings on Discogs. But, you know, I have the CD version, I have the vinyl version, and this song opens that record. So we're doing a nice little track 1 here today.
Yeah, and the song is also track 1 on the 1998 compilation Where Quantity is Job Number 1 from G7 Welcoming Committee. And the second reference to this song is on the inside of the CD insert from Quantity. It reads, recorded and mixed in 2 days, a long time ago, at God of Thunder Studios by Paul James, Tim Clark, and Chris Brett. That's right. Even with 3 sets of objective ears, somehow no one bothered to tell me that my vocals hovered somewhere between asinine and hilarious. Listen to track 4 and ask me again why I have no sense of self-esteem or brain.
Oh, Chris, ever the joyful character on that one. I love it. You know, in there, I was also digging around on seeing where else this song may appear, and I had totally forgotten that this is on the Live from Occupied Territory live DVD from 2003.
No, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. It appears as it's track 15 if you count the spoken word track as track 1. Otherwise, it would be like the 14th song on that live album. But yeah, it's on Live from Occupied Territory as well. So you can find the recording and the video of that on Bandcamp and on YouTube, which is cool because the versions that you find of this on the 10-inch and the versions that you find in like 1994 through 1996 performed live, Chris is screaming his head off. But in the 2003 version, he's singing it in the vocal style that we have come to know.
Right.
So you can hear this performed by Chris in a couple of different ways if you go and seek out different live recordings of it.
Hey, Greg here. After Keith and I recorded, a few covers were submitted, so I'm going to interject a few random points in this episode to play some covers. This first one is from Matt Milkowski. You might remember Matt as our guest on the Contest Song episode because he wrote lyrics to a version that came to be known as Common Threads, which he then collaborated on with Willem from Intellectual to bring you the version that you heard in episode 55. They have since made a music video for that version as well, which you can find on YouTube at Intellectual's channel. Matt has an indie rap and punk project called Catching Confetti, so if you like this version of Mutual Friend and the instrumental that follows it, you can visit catchingconfetti.bandcamp.com to hear more of Matt's work. Okay, enjoy. This is a great one.
There was nothing remotely romantic about it. No hand-me-down sob stories, nurture genetic. So what was so goddamn important that I felt I had to shelve each and every one of my convictions? Secured, mutually reassured of our consistency, but your defense rejects what you believe. What the fuck is so sociable about animal confinement, torture, union busting, sexism, and isn't it strange how you don't call anymore?
Yeah, well, Greg, this is a song that I came into this without a whole lot of like, I guess, personal connection to. It's not occupied too much in my headspace throughout my fandom as a Propaganda fan. It's just not really been there at the forefront of songs that either I reference, I suggest, or even listen to a ton. So, given that, I'm really glad that you have someone to talk to about this song who does have quite a bit to say.
Yeah, so our guest on this episode is not a name that a lot of people will immediately recognize, but this is such a fun interview. So the guest is someone named Paul Bright. And even though you may not recognize this out there, let me tell you a little bit about Paul, because Paul is awesome. Paul is a musician and former record label owner from London, Ontario, just across the river here from me in Buffalo. London's a couple hours down the road, but his most notable band was called Shoulder, and Shoulder was like an emo band from London, Ontario, Canada, and they were active from 1994 to 1997, which, if you think about the context of when Propaganda was active, 94 to 97 is what a lot of people would categorize as like the glory period of the early years for Propaganda. But Shoulder released a demo tape in 95, a full length called Touch in 1995, a split 7-inch with Morning again in 1996, and a 7-inch single in 1996. And the band was writing a second full length album in 97 when they broke up. The band members started playing together in 99 and decided to change the name of the band to a band that became Canadian music royalty, basically, called the Constantines. And I don't know if you ever heard the Constantines, but they were on Sub Pop Records for a long time. And I saw the Constantines live once in St. Louis, opening up for the Weaker Thans. So the band Shoulder, they had their record. The cover art was also designed by Kyle Bishop from Grade, which was really cool. So if you find Touch, the artwork and photography was done by Kyle Bishop. And hilariously, I didn't know any of this when I got Paul on the phone, because I had never heard of Shoulder. I had heard of the Constantines, but I didn't know about Paul's connection to the Constantines. So he just told me that via DM on Instagram. He's like, hey, listen, I promoted that 1996 show that Damian Abraham from Fucked Up referenced in the state lottery interview. He's like, I was the promoter for that. And I was like, oh, sweet. Come on the podcast and tell me about it. So Paul listened to that episode and he got in touch. And then all of these stories start to come out in the interview that Paul has just like been telling me about this amazing history of Shoulder and promoting shows and like the early years of Propaganda and his connection to the Constantines. So this was like a massive shock for me, how awesome this interview wound up being. So I am super delighted to welcome Paul Bright to the podcast as our guest for Mutual Friend. But before we get into Paul's interview, I want to lead in with a listener submitted cover. I put out a call on Twitter before this episode was recorded, and I said, hey, open up your voice memos on your iPhone, record a cover of Mutual Friend and email it to me. Don't overthink it. So we got one, and I'm so happy. But this cover was performed by Jesse Byars. So thank you so much to Jesse Byars for submitting this Mutual Friend cover. Thank you to Paul Bright for coming on the show and telling me all these great stories. And we'll be back after the interview and the cover.
There was nothing remotely romantic about it. No hand-me-down sob stories, nurtured or genetic. So what was so goddamn important? That fell down the shelf, each and every one of my convictions. Secured, mutually reassured of our consistency. Your defense reject what you claim to believe. What the fuck is so sociable about animal confinement, torture, union busting, sexism? And isn't it strange how you don't call anymore?
Paul Bright, welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about Propaganda.
Thanks, man. This is I can't believe I'm actually here. I've made it.
You, Paul. And here's the thing, dude. You stuck with me with regards to scheduling conflicts and challenges and things like that. So your persistence has truly paid off, and you have really blown my mind with some things via Instagram DMs, which we will be talking a whole lot about in this conversation. So I am just as delighted that you are here, and I'm wondering if we can just start off by having you tell the audience a little bit about who you are, so they know like who they're listening to.
Sure. I mean, I was a kid who was involved in the hardcore scene in Ontario in the early 90s, mid 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And it completely consumed my life in every conceivable way. And, Propaganda kind of like appeared a couple times throughout that era. And that it was always very meaningful when it did, or when they did. I had a record store and a record label. I played in what would be called an emo band.
Lovely.
Yeah, like Midwestern emo, if that means anything.
Dude, I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. And the whole Chicago scene and the Kansas City scene all kind of coalesced, there's a name for you, dropped within my upbringing as well. So like I was a huge part of that like Alkaline Trio era in the late 90s. So that kind of, you're speaking my language here, and Cap and Jazz and all kinds of stuff like that. I am right with you.
Wow, Cap and Jazz. I haven't heard that name in a while, but
fabulous.
But that's like a quarter century ago. So here we are though, talking about Propaganda. I mean,
yes.
That was like one of the bands that really like, that was like right at the very beginning. I know that you sometimes ask people like how they got into punk or how they got into even the band. I mean, where should I start?
Yeah, I mean, that's basically what I want to know. Like tell me a little bit about how you got, what was your involvement in the scene like, and then we can kind of get into Propaganda from there, like of just being a fan of the band before they kind of crossed your path. I'm curious about that.
I mean, well, I got into punk because the Misfits had not the Misfits, fucking Metallica had a couple Misfits songs.
Yes.
On that Garage Days record, which was like 1988. So I would have been maybe 11.
Mm-hmm.
And then like our babysitter showed us that. And, and, I got into the Misfits, and I got into like punk in a weird chronological order. So I started with the Misfits, and then my friends and I got into like, like everything, like Minor Threat, and then 7 Seconds. And then I got heavily into like Youth of Today and the whole straight edge thing.
Yes.
So by the time the early 90s came along, I was definitely straight edge. And I was very much into like this new, very slick, catchy, poppy, hyper kind of melodic, version of hardcore. It was very, very easy to you know what I'm talking about, like Epitaph Record stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I have a clear memory of standing in front of my middle school with my friends, and we were punks, and there was this one kid, he had this idea that he wanted to be grosser than Gigi Allen. So we were trying to come up with something for him to do that was grosser than Gigi Allen.
Oh my God.
And I remember, and then two older kids from like, they were already in grade 9. We were like about to go into high school. They walked up to us, and they just kind of like came up and said, "You gotta fucking hear this." And it's like, what? And they had this goofy looking CD with like these, drawings of like cleaning supplies. And they're just like, this, you gotta hear this. And, the gold standard was Ribbed. Ribbed by NoFX was the fucking gold standard for that type of music.
Nice.
And I was in a band. You're not gonna. Okay, the band was called the Moron Brothers.
Nice, named after the NoFX song.
No, we were straight up. That was like what we were trying to do.
Oh, and, wow.
So me and my friends in the Moron Brothers, we put this record on, and it was like, all right, this is faster and it's angrier and it's catchier than Ribbed. It's like, what is this? And these older kids are like, you're not like, this band is from Canada. because, you know, we're in London, Ontario, Canada. And we're like, what? Fucking Canada? How is that possible?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, the guy from NoFX, he started his own record label. What? How did he do that? Because we thought that Epitaph Records was like a big office tower in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
You know, with like Mr. Brett from Bad Religion sitting around a boardroom table. Like, you couldn't wrap our heads around what a record label was, you know?
Yeah.
But this guy from NoFX started his own label, and he went to Canada and he found this band is this good. It just was mind blowing. And the other thing I really remember was this one of the kids said, my dad said these lyrics are actually dangerous. And it's like, you know, with NoFX, it's kind of like new boobs. And once every 24 hours, I'm supposed to take a shower, but I don't want to do it. Like, that's what we were working with.
Yeah.
You know, like the NoFX lyrics were funny and goofy and, you know, like the Moron Brothers. But now you got like these guys talking about the Gaza Strip and stuff. And it was really like a big kind of like mushroom explosion in our little 14-year-old heads to like wrap our minds around this and kind of like get into it. And so that was kind of like how I got into Propaganda, and school had just gotten out. So that means it was June of 93, which means that record was probably out for like 2 weeks.
Yeah, it was brand new.
Yeah. So, you know, that was like the beginning of getting familiar with Propaganda. But and by the way, I'm a Propaganda guy. I'm not
That's
a Propaganda guy. I know that I'm in the minority on that, but
No, you're not. Not at all.
I can't help myself.
Yeah, don't force yourself to say it. Sometimes people like try to force themselves to say it, and then they'll say it both ways, like on the podcast. And I always chuckle when I'm listening back to it because it's like they force themselves into saying it the unnatural way, and I always get a big kick out of that.
Well, I'll stick with Propaganda for now.
That's fine.
But yeah, man, I mean, one of the things I used to do all the time was I would write letters to bands and record labels. You know, I would like, it's so goofy now that I look back on it, but it was like, you know, that Chris Farley character on Saturday Night Live who like interviews, like, that was awesome. I would send letters to like Revelation Records saying, oh, I heard Youth of Today got banned from CBGBs. And like, that would just be my letter. And they would write back and they'd be like, yep. So I wrote a letter to Fat Records, like saying, look, like, I know you guys signed this band from Canada. I'm in a band called the Moron Brothers. And, you know, like, are you guys going to come to London? And why don't you listen to our demo? And they wrote back and they're like, yes, we are going to come to London, Ontario. And, you know, like it was early 1994 by then. And in the year that went on from there, my band got like better and we improved, and hardcore was kind of like changing a lot. You know, it was going from like Green Day, Offspring, commercial, Epitaph, Fat Records type stuff. And then the other direction, which was like much more crusty and underground and no barcodes and like Ebullition Records and Kent McClard and Heart Attack Magazine, you know, all that shit.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like going in these two different directions. And by the time NoFX got to London, Ontario, I had this idea that it's like, either we're going to get signed to Fat Records or I'm just going to quit the band and do something else. And again, I'm like 14. I'm like not particularly like, you know, this was my dream. So NoFX comes to London and they hear that there's a band in London called the Moron Brothers. And we're in line for the show. There's a huge line down the street. And the promoter of the club begrudgingly comes up to me and like the other members of my band and says, all right, guys, NoFX wants to meet you.
Oh my God.
So we had our demo tape ready because this was like, we were praying for this moment. And they usher us onto this tour bus. And me and Bry from the Moron Brothers were pretty straight edge. We were like pretty serious and like, we didn't fuck around. But the other two guys were like, you know, skate punk kind of like these guys just love to skate and smoke hash.
Yeah.
So like we get on the bus and there's Fat Mike and Eric, the drummer. And they were really, really sweet and nice. And, we were like little kids, and I don't know how old these guys were. They were probably only in their 20s as well. This is like early 94. And we played them the demo cassette, and all they said was like, oh, this is really, really fast, which I thought was cool. And then Mark and Zach, the drummer and bass player for my band, then decided that they should offer NoFX some hash. And they weren't into it. They didn't like that at all. They're like, no, we're about to play. We don't want that. And I was so embarrassed. And they were like, what? You guys don't want to smoke hash? And I tried to change the subject. So I said to the drummer of NoFX, I'm like, so who's the best drummer in punk rock? And I already had my answer prepared. And he was like, oh, it's my friend, blah, blah, blah. He plays in the Legwagon. And I'm like, no, it's George from Propaganda.
Nice.
And this was like some stupid little like thing that I had planned. Like I was going to like somehow test them about like who's the best drummer, because I thought George was the best drummer in punk rock. And anyway, the whole thing like fizzled out. And NoFX played. They played Punk and Drublic like before it came out, which I have to say that was pretty cool. But after that, that was kind of like the end of my involvement in that type of punk music. I just had enough of like that style. And me and Bry formed this emo band who was much more like, very, very like different, more like Fugazi and Split Lip and all these early 90s emo bands. And that was kind of like the end of that. And I don't know, man, I just went on a tirade for like 10 minutes, but a few years went on and the hardcore scene really, really changed in this all over the place, in the States and in Canada. And like, there were all these Canadian bands who were, it was like Chokehold and Earth Crisis and Slugfest and Despair and Snapcase and all these like much more metallic bands. So they didn't sound like pop punk at all. And we kind of like went in that direction for a couple years. And a lot of shit happened in my personal life. I like moved out of my parents' house at like a really, really young age. And I got like this little apartment, and I started a record label. And a couple of years went by, and I was promoting shows in London, and I just came home one day. This is like 1996, 2 years later. There's a message on my answering machine, and it's this guy. Hi, I'm looking to organize a show in London. We heard you put on shows. My name's Jord. I drum with a Propaganda, and by then I think I was like 17, and I like almost peed my pants.
What a dream.
It was like it was so fucking mind-blowing, like, because like you still have these ideas of these guys being like your heroes, and all of a sudden this guy from like this, by then Propaganda was like, they were always big, but they were like the most legendary punk band in Canada easily.
Yeah. What year was this again?
This is 2 years later. This is now 1996. And by then
is this with Less Talk out or pre Less Talk?
Less Talk had come out.
Okay.
And again, I was so like, I was on this fucking like mission to find the fastest, hardest, angriest, heaviest, most obscure music possible. And that didn't include Fat Records.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I was like just listening to the screamiest, crazy shit. And like, so I had the record and I liked it, but it was almost like kind of embarrassed to be into like, like that record is particularly like, those songs are really well written, and they're like kind of catchy, and it was like the next level for sure from the previous record. And it's like they called me and I'm like, fuck yeah, I'll set up a show, but I'm gonna do it my way. So I of course had my own band open for them. I mean, of course, that's like a no-brainer. But I also chose this other band, Left for Dead, who was like a really have you heard of this band?
I think they've come up on the podcast before, but that's as far as my knowledge goes.
They're kind of like I guess you'd call it like power violence, or, I mean, there were just other kids from Hamilton. Like one of the guys was in Chokehold, but
You
I put
know,
together.
I guarantee you they came up on Damian Abraham's podcast at one point or another because the name just rings such a bell.
They were known for being like, well, they were very good and they were really nice guys, but they were incredibly like crazy, like violent, like supposedly like violent shows, and really like super like not PC at all, like really trying to press everyone's buttons. And but I was into that at the time, like I was into all sorts of stuff, especially, I was also really into like Earth Crisis and like vegan straight edge bands. Like that was cool. And I never really understood how none of these vegan like political hardcore bands didn't know about like propaganda, or maybe they did, but they didn't know about their politics or their ethics or their the way they did things. And eventually everything kind of came to a head with these series of shows that happened in late 1996 in Ontario. It's like Toronto, Ottawa, and London. And Propaganda played with a bunch of these hardcore bands, like, you know what I mean, hardcore, like these really kind of like underground, edgy, like, whatever type bands. But they also played with some pop punk bands as well. In fact, the show in Toronto had one show of the hardcore bands and one show of the pop punk bands. So, it's like I called them back and I said, yes, of course I'll do the show. And we set it up, and it was at a place called Call the Office, which was where all the shows were. And to give you just another example of like what was going on, like there were shows in Toronto that were just like in people's basements, and there'd be like 8 people, like Chokehold. There's a band called Union of Uranus, who is like a absolutely legendary band from Ottawa. I remember I had the option of driving 2 hours to Toronto to go see Union of Uranus in Dave and Irene's basement in front of 8 people, or staying in London and Call the Office in front of 80 people. There's like this British band with a lot of buzz about them playing their record, The Bends.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
And I chose to drive to fucking Toronto to see the show in my friend's basement. And it was just like, in retrospect, I purposefully put myself in positions to find the most obscure shit possible when, there were a lot of great bands in the mid 90s that I probably should have checked out.
Yeah.
Like I didn't see Radiohead for that show, which is definitely a mistake. And, like there were, I wish I broadened my horizons a little bit, but at the time I was just on this obsession with the most hardcore shit I could find, and that lasted for years. Anyway, that's how we kind of got to this point where we had this show, and Propaganda showed up, and Left 4 Dead was really late, so my band played first, Shoulder. We played our little emo set, and we played like a Rites of Spring song, which I remember the guys in Propaganda like thought was, like they thought that was cool. And again, like I'm a kid who's like, really, my mind was just so blown at this whole thing. Like these guys were going to be sleeping at my apartment. And I was like, I had this tiny little 1-bedroom apartment, a little basement apartment. And, it's like they played their set, and it was a really tense night because we oversold the tickets. Like this place held like 500 people, and like more than 1,000 kids showed up. Like kids like in London, like left school that day to stand in line for the show. And like we played, then Left 4 Dead played, and kids were smashing the windows out of the club trying to get in.
Oh my God.
I know that sounds over the top, but I tracked down like the original owner of the club, and he was like, yes, that happened.
Wow.
And I remember that like Left 4 Dead was like, I reached out to the guy from Left 4 Dead, Chris, who's like the sweetest guy. I haven't talked to him in a quarter century. And I DM'd him, and it's like our conversation picked up from where it left off 25 years ago.
You just did this recently?
Yeah, like 2 days ago.
Amazing. I love to hear it. Reconnecting with old people because you're going to go on a propaganda podcast. That's just,
well, it's like
very
hardcore.
delightful.
It's like,
yeah,
you know, these guys, it's like, this has been our lives. Some of us are like actual, like kind of lifers in a weird way. Like, it's not like I go to hardcore shows every day, but you know, we just started talking like it was yesterday. And he's like, oh God, you know, he, like, him and his band, like, definitely talked shit about propaganda during their set. Like, they were making fun of them, and they were making like, what is this Fat Records bullshit? And like, and one thing he said is like, but this show is just full of snowboarders. And it was. It's like we had shows there all the time, and it's usually like 100 kids or 50 kids. There's like 1,000 kids, and they're all like, where did all these snowboarders come from?
Yeah. Oh my God.
And you know, they were like kind of talking shit about propaganda, and like to this day, it's like Chris like is like, oh, I can't believe we did that. We didn't know who those guys were, or like. And to be honest with you, it's like Left 4 Dead was this kind of like power violence band. Todd wasn't Swallowing Shit at the time.
Yeah.
You know that band?
Yeah. I have one of their 7 inches.
Swallowing Shit is like a legitimately fucking terrifying band.
Yeah, they're amazing.
Yeah, they're incredible. And it's just like, you guys don't really know who you're talking to here. And I don't remember, like, this show is on, there's like a video recording of it, and I can't find it. It's somewhere. By the time you actually put this thing on the podcast, maybe I will have found it and you can like check it out. But
dude, we should digitize it and put it on YouTube.
Yes, we will definitely do that. I found this one kid today who thought he had it, but it was just some other boring propaganda set from like 1994. So anyway, you know, the show was incredible. I will always remember propaganda coming back to my apartment. And again, it's like 100 square foot apartment, and they had a rider, and on the rider it said, we want a vegan meal.
Yeah.
Which of course makes sense. And like 17-year-old like me, like, all right, fuck, what's vegan? All right, I'll get some potatoes. And I made this stew, and it was potatoes, celery, and just a fuckload of bay leaves. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And I left it kind of like cooking while they were at the show, and we all got back to my apartment, and it was like burnt, and we were like scraping like this like bay leaf mash off of like this, and they were so nice. They're like, oh, this is great, man, thanks. And they just slept on my floor, and like they're just like goofy, funny like guys. You know, they weren't like, there were rumors about those guys, like they're gonna kick your ass if you wore like leather shoes, you know, are like all these weird rumors, but they're just the sweetest guys, and they like they were just making fart jokes. I remember we all went to sleep, and like I made a fake fart noise, and they just giggled and giggled and giggled.
Was it Todd at that show?
So that's okay. So here's a couple things about that little mini tour. These are some of Todd's first shows for sure. And it's also, as I'm sure you've probably seen from like footage on YouTube, this is like the introduction of Fuck the Border into the set list.
Yeah.
And these are very subdued propaganda shows. Like, you know, like if you see them playing, you know, from a show from somewhere like 2 years ago, like everybody is like going fucking nuts.
Oh yeah, I just saw them in Winnipeg, and it was insane.
Yeah, but like in 1996, like you had 1,000 snowboarders, and they just wanted to hear Anti-Manifesto, and they didn't want to hear all these new weird songs. They were like much, you know, they were slower, like not like they were really slow, but they were like mid-tempo. And you know, I recorded the whole show, and I played it for them afterwards, and they weren't really into it. Like Chris in particular was like, oh man, I'm glad you recorded this, because like we need to like fix some things about our sound, because it would like, I remember he had like a really small amp, and it wasn't like a big heavy sound, you know, he was playing like this weird like Jackson kind of guitar maybe, and it definitely didn't sound as like heavy or as intense as you would know from the last, whatever, the last few years or whatever. And like kids they were just kind of like standing there, and like it wasn't there like a big mosh pit or anything like that. Although I remember Fuck the Border definitely got people's attention. Like that was like, whoa. Anyway, like this will kind of be like a segue into the whole reason why I'm on this thing is this song, Mutual Friends, which like that was another song that they kind of used kind of like as an explanation point on the end of a set. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, like it just like kind of go out with a bang, sort of.
Exactly. Like if you see sets of theirs from like 93, 94, they end with this song and it just kicks people's ass.
Yeah.
Like, like after How to Clean Everything came out, there was, of course, the legendary split with I Spy. And that's, the first song on the split with I Spy. And it just like, you kind of were used to How to Clean Everything. And then you hear this record and it's like, holy shit, Propaganda is getting way more intense. Like, this is incredible.
Yeah.
And that's why that song for me, like, it was always one of my favorite songs. And also, like, sorry, like, you want to talk about the song now? I've just been fucking going on and on.
Well, what's really funny is you just said that it was one that they used to end with, and I just went into Google just now and I randomly typed in Propaganda's set list 1995, and a set list from April 7th, 1995 just popped up from Minneapolis, Minnesota at a venue called The Hole, and they played 10 songs, and number 10 in April of 1995 is Mutual Friend. And it's just hilarious that the first thing I pulled up closes on this song that you just mentioned is something that you used to see them close with. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely up to that time, it's one of their it was probably their most like really fuck you in your face, intense, fast, angry songs. Like Chris, like kind of, I don't know if he was thinking about this stuff at the time, but like if you're gonna blow your voice out on any song, that's like the one,
Yeah, well,
and
a couple things about that show, like that you promoted with them. Was it just the one show that you promoted with them in London?
That's the only show I promoted with Propaganda. Yeah. I mean,
okay.
Like they came to my place and they left, they got in the van, and that was really like a bookend of that part of my life. Like after that, I never looked back at that type of music. Like I corresponded with Todd a little bit about G7 Records stuff, but like I just continued on with my band Shoulder. And then by the late 90s, I was completely burnt out on hardcore music to the point where, like, it's a bit of a cliche, but these guys who like just burn out on hardcore, they always get into free jazz.
Nice.
And I just like was only into free jazz.
Nice.
Drop Dead is heavy, man, but have you heard Peter Bratzman? like that's what I'm into now. Like, and I swear, like I didn't listen to punk music at all for like years. I just like burnt myself out on it. But anyway.
Well, and another thing that I was curious about is in the DMs that you and I have had for the last like month or so, you mentioned that you heard that show mentioned on this podcast, right?
Yes, definitely.
Like, tell me about that. Like, whenever you were like, wait a minute, I was there. Tell me about, like, what did you hear it on? I can't remember.
Damien from Fucked Up, like, was talking about it.
That show.
Yeah.
Okay,
definitely.
so he was in the room in London for that show where the windows were getting smashed out.
I don't know if he was in the room. I think that he heard rumors about the show from the guys from Left 4 Dead.
Oh, okay.
And I know that Damien has also talked to Chris on his podcast about this show as well.
Oh my goodness, I have to go listen back to that again.
Yeah, because my band Shoulder kind of morphed into another band called the Constantines. I don't know if you ever heard of that band or not.
Are you serious? I saw the Constantines open for the Weaker Thans in St. Louis in like 2000.
Yeah, there you go. So like after we kind of fizzled out, and like I left the band like right as the Constantines was starting.
So you're talking about Bry from the Constantines, Bry Webb, right?
You mean Bry Webb from the Moron Brothers?
Dude, unbelievable. Like, this is insane how this is just coming all together here. This is blowing my mind.
Yeah, so me and Bry were the ones who weren't into hash.
Yeah, okay.
But me and Bry were in the Moron Brothers, and then Shoulder was the emo band that we did for like 5 years. And then me and Bry and Doug, the drummer from Shoulder, was the drummer in the Constantines. And then I like quit hardcore. I opened an art gallery, and like art became my life for 20 years. So that's like, I just like, and I kept in touch with those guys a little bit, and Doug, all those Constantines guys still like keep in touch with all the, the Weaker Thans guys, and all they all went on. But yeah, for sure, Bry Webb. Yeah,
amazing.
That was all us.
It had to have been 2003 or 2002 that I saw the Constantines, because I'm on their Discogs right now, and I know I definitely bought their album Shine a Light on CD at that show, which didn't come out on Sub Pop until 2003. So it had to have been about 2003. But yeah, I saw the Constantines open for the Weaker Thans, and they were absolutely mind blowing. I was like against the stage, just like my brain was just going crazy with how great they were live too. They were so intense.
Yeah, well, I wasn't in them, so whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
Oh my gosh. I mean, the Constantines are a fucking legendary band. I mean, the record Tournament of Hearts, I think personally is their best record. But yeah, I mean, what can I say? They're incredible.
Dude, do you know your name is listed as an ex-member on the Constantine's Discogs page?
Yeah, I wrote their first song. That's a fact.
Well, dude, your name is listed on the Constantine's Discogs homepage. I'm looking at it right now.
That's funny. I wrote a song. Oh man, what was it called? No something. No. Anyway, yeah, man. I mean, we used to jam with the guys from Two Line. You know a band called Two Line Filler?
I do not know that band.
Oh God, Two Line Filler was a legendary Toronto punk emo hardcore band. Like there was a lot of members who kind of went back and forth in these bands, but like I'm definitely not claiming that I had anything to do with the Constantines other than being like in their first few practices. And I will claim that I wrote the music to their first song. Sorry guys, but it's true.
Nice. Well, and I'm looking at your Discogs for Shoulder and your album Touch. There's a few used copies for sale for $45 on Discogs right now.
It's a rare record.
Yeah,
the
it says
record
it's the really clear pressing.
The Chokehold Left for Dead record is hard to get, and the whole point of that record, it was supposed to be Chokehold Propaganda, and but Chris didn't like the sound of that recording so much that he was like, we're not going to do it. And I'm sure that like Fat Records said, you're not going to do a fucking split live LP on some kid's record label. So it ended up being Chokehold Left for Dead. So the Left for Dead side of that record, which is super rare, is the Propaganda show. And I can't find it anywhere.
On vinyl?
I can't find it on vinyl. I'm sure maybe it's on some German guy on Discogs for like $200. But like, if you were to listen to that, you will probably hear the shit talking maybe.
Oh man. Well, I did just find a copy for sale in the US for $23 on Discogs. If you want dibs on it, I'll let you buy it if you want it.
You should. Yeah. Well, one of us should buy it. I would love to hear it. Like, I'm sure a bunch of kids from back then have it, but like,
amazing. So that was Rhythm of Sickness Records.
Yeah, that was my record label. So I put out a whole bunch of stuff. That was also the name of my record store. And like I said, this was my life for like 6 years. All I did was hardcore, and I still like am feeling like I really, really lived that stuff, and I never have really had a normal life since then, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Like I've never had a job. Like I've done every single thing in my life to those kind of like weird DIY like principles, like I started various art galleries, and I'm art and antiques, and like I've found other hardcore guys who are also into that stuff. And I adopted a baby, and like I did a whole bunch of stuff that I thought was kind of like to those DIY, those standards, whatever the fuck that means. But that's another thing that Chris from Left for Dead said. He's like, he's still living like that. And it's like, sometimes it's just you wonder like, wow, should I still be doing this? Like I'm in my 40s, you know?
Yeah. It's a
But
weird feeling.
the only other thing I can say though about that song is that like there's that line, what's so funny? You know, like what's so funny about this, and this?
Yeah.
And like I really felt that way. Like what's so funny about it? Like animal rights? What's so funny about like not treating like women like shit? Like what's so funny about like not wanting to smoke hash? Like fuck you. It's like that Elvis Costello song, you know, what's so funny about peace, love, and understanding? It's kind of like, you know, like that was what I took from that song. Like that song like is kind of, it's an anti-drinking song, sort of like. I like there are certain introductions that Chris did live of that song where he taught it's about like the alcohol industry, really. And you know, at the time, like Propaganda were definitely not a straight edge band, but like, you know, their politics were really in line with a lot of the other like straight edge hardcore vegan bands from that era.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of, like, you have the lyrics of that song in front of you, right?
Yeah. Well, you know, something that's ringing a bell for me. I've said recently, sort of publicly, that I haven't been doing any drinking for the last over 80 days now. I haven't had any alcohol. And during the pandemic, it just kind of like got away from me, where I was like, you know, it's embarrassing, but you know, I might as well talk about it publicly in case anybody else is dealing with it and wants to make a change as well. But like White Claw, you know, that hard seltzer drink. Yes. I was drinking those things almost every day, and it just got to the point to where I realized that I was making my life significantly worse, and I was just putting money in the pockets of people that didn't care about me, and I was just making them even richer every week, just buying that stuff at the grocery store. And it kind of made me realize that I didn't need to do that anymore. I didn't need to enrich people who didn't care about me. As like I had control over this one thing. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, I think some of the live introductions to this song, you know, Chris never really goes so far as to say, like, don't drink, but he kind of just says, look, if you want to drink, just like brew your own, or, you know, find a different way of doing it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting. I mean, and then of course, White Claw, man.
Oh,
I have to say, like, I did have a mango White Claw a couple of years ago, and I had like the best luck of my life. Like something happened where like it was like one of the luckiest days of my life. And I had another mango White Claw a year after, and it happened again.
Wow. Oh my God.
But it's mango White Claw.
Yeah, amazing. Hey, do you have that show that you promoted in London recorded? Did you, like, I know you mentioned that you might have that, right? That's the same show?
Yes, definitely. Yes, absolutely.
What was the recording exist from?
What's that?
How did you do the recording? Was it a board recording?
Absolutely.
Oh man, so you have a potentially like buried in boxes, like an insanely good recording of a 96 Propaganda show, one of Todd's first ones.
Yeah, there's no question that it exists. So I found the guy who recorded it on Instagram, and like there's a bunch of people who I'm just like one step away from finding all of this shit. But it definitely exists. Like there's probably like there might even be like a DAT. Like it's there for sure.
Amazing.
So yeah,
you have to keep looking.
I will keep looking. And you know, like the only other thing I can say about Propaganda is that like I didn't listen to this type of music for like 20 years for whatever reason. I was into like other things. And you have to remember in the early 2000s, like I was driving a van across America, like flipping Eames chairs and shit. Like I was really living like a different kind of life. Like I didn't have a record player, you know? Mm-hmm. And then it wasn't until like the later in the early 2000s that like iPods and stuff came along, and it made it much, much easier to like listen to all sorts of music. And YouTube didn't even come along until like 2005. So I gradually started to become interested in music again. And, I was really into like stuff like the Afghan Wigs and blah, 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 stuff like that. Like more like indie rock stuff. And then about 20 years later, a friend of mine came over and like put on some music on like iTunes or whatever. And it was just the most glorious, like instrumental prog rock, kind of like Rush, but a little heavier. And like, I'm like, what the fuck is this? This is like the perfect band. And he was playing the first 3 minutes of Last Will and Testament by Propaganda.
Yeah.
You know that song? Like it's the last song on
Oh
Supporting
yeah.
Cast.
Oh, we know it.
And it's just like, this is some of the best shit I have ever heard in my life. What is this?
Yeah.
He's like, it's Propaganda, man. I'm like, oh my God. And it's like, I bought like, yeah, you don't know what it's like to not hear this band for 20 years and then rediscover them. And they're like 10 times better.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, I never stopped. They've been like my favorite band for decades now, basically. But like,
yeah,
I can imagine the joy that you must have felt at finding Today's Empires, Potemkin City Limits, Supporting Cast, and Failed States, and then just being like, oh my God, I cannot believe this all exists.
It was like one of the most fucking life-affirming, like most incredible things. Like, because these guys are they're not like little kids anymore. Now they're like dads like me.
Yeah.
They're like 40 something or 50 or whatever, how old they are. And like, they sound so much better and they're so much heavier and faster. And they're still this angry. And I couldn't fucking believe it. It's just like it's like a TV show. Like you never heard of Seinfeld. And you just discover this masterpiece of a art, like a body of work, like a body of, art. And, I just completely like listened to all those like later records over and over again. And like, I remember I ran the New York City Marathon listening to Propaganda.
Nice.
Yeah, man. I distinctly remember running through like Greenpoint, like air drumming to Propaganda, and people think I looked looking like I looked insane.
That's the way to do it, though. That's when you hit that 22-mile bonk during a marathon, like putting on some Propaganda for me would give me a second life for sure.
I listened to Propaganda through mile 7 to 17.
Nice.
And at 22 miles, I listened to Firestorm by Earth Crisis.
Nice. That's amazing. Also connected to this podcast.
Sort of. I mean, I have heard like that. This may or may not be true, but like the members of Propaganda, I think Chris in particular, thinks that it was maybe a little bit of a missed opportunity to not connect more with Earth Crisis.
Possibly.
Because, their politics were like very similar on certain things. They're both like these vegan bands who are really like trying to do a certain thing. Earth Crisis ended up being like this kind of goofy, tough guy metal band with some questionable politics about certain things for sure. But like in 1993, those guys kind of lined up pretty kind of well with a lot of the things they were saying.
Yeah.
And it's like, I've read some interviews with those guys, Propaganda, and it's interesting, like, the perspective they have on things now. It's been 30 years.
Yeah.
And yeah. Anyway, I did go see them. I went and saw them when they did Victory Lap. And what can I say? It's like the Bangers Embrace. It was exactly like that. It was just these beautiful bookends of, it's like the lyrics of that song were so like potent and accurate about like me going to see Propaganda after not seeing them for 25 years. And just like moshing, like, like as hard as I can. And like, I have to admit, like all the other guys in the crowd were like, like sad dads.
They were annoyed by you, I bet, weren't they?
No, they were like going fucking nuts.
Oh,
like,
good.
Everyone was going nuts. It was crazy. I remember I went to the bar and I brought like the pit, like 6 big jugs of water, and all these like really exhausted, like 45-year-old guys were like, "Oh, thanks, man. This is nice. Incredible." And like just this bond, like, I I met Todd. He didn't know who I was, even though we corresponded like 25 years earlier.
Yeah.
We talked about like jiu-jitsu or something, or George St. Pierre, or like, because he's like a black belt in jiu-jitsu.
Something like that. I need to talk to Todd more about martial arts in the future.
Oh, I'm not going to take up too much more of your time, but like one of the funnier Todd interviews is like the guy, the interviewer like hears that he's like into jiu-jitsu, and he's like, "Oh yeah, you, Glenn Danzig, and Henry Rollins go into an alley. Who comes out alive?" And Todd's answer is it's very humble and very matter of fact, and he's just like, "Oh, there's no question. I would destroy them."
Nice.
Or it's like you tear their fucking limbs off.
Oh my
But he
God.
says it in a really polite way. He's just like, "Oh, it wouldn't even be close."
Yeah. Amazing. I love that. That's an amazing story.
Yeah.
So where was this this live show that you saw after decades of not seeing them?
It was in Brooklyn and Greenpoint. It was the Victory Lap tour.
Yeah.
And
2017, 2018. Do you remember what year it was?
It was probably, oh man, it was the year of the marathon. So probably 2000. It was like 17, probably.
Cool.
And they were just exactly what you would expect, just like unbelievably tight, like very, very professional, and just like one of the best live bands you can imagine. You've seen them. I mean, it is.
I just saw them. Yeah, I saw them 3 nights in a row just this past October, and it was just as good as ever.
I never saw them with the Beeve, but like Sulin is a masterful.
Fabulous.
It's just like these people are not superheroes, like as you've shown from your podcast, you can reach out to them and they're gracious and they're kind and they're humble and they're pretty funny, and it's just weird meeting your heroes like that.
It is like that's one of the things that I cannot overstate is how fortunate Keith and I both feel with the band that we selected to do this podcast about, because you start a song by song podcast of a band and there is no guarantee that the band will ever acknowledge you or give you the time of day. But
yes.
This band, I mean, I put out a compilation episode of our collected interviews, which was 8 hours long.
Yeah.
And then since we put out that compilation, we've already published like 2 or 3 more episodes with interviews with the bands. Like they're like ongoing collaborators with us. And it's truly, truly amazing.
Yeah. I mean, the one that you just did with Todd about Fuck the Border. I mean, the guy is like, he's so unassuming and humble, but he also practices his art form. Like, he's like, I get up and I exercise and I play guitar and I paint, and it's like he's a brilliant artist, and it's like they just kind of live the life, and I try and kind of do that as much as I can. Once in a while I still drink a couple White Claws, but like I try to live to a certain standard, but they're just like this holy grail of awesomeness.
Yeah.
Anyway, man.
Do you so I'm assuming that since you rediscovered the band that you've gone back and like kind of looked through the discography quite a bit. Have you decided, like, and they've gone through many changes in sound over the years since you originally found them. Do you have a favorite era or record that is
it's the
like
same as everybody? It's the same answer anyone has. It's supporting cast. It's one of the greatest.
Yes.
So one of the greatest punk records of all time. It's flawless, and I know for a fact from being in a band and from reading interviews is that like they would rate their records almost in chronological order as to best to worst.
Mm-hmm.
So feeling like Victory Lap is the best record, and it kind of goes back from there. But there's something about supporting cast that it still kind of sticks out as essentially a flawless record. Potemkin City Limits is my favorite Propaganda song. And then of course, Without Love is like one of the better songs ever written. And then from there, like this song that we're talking about that we touched on very briefly is definitely in my top 5. And I mean, I will say this, and I'm just going to come out and say it. Let's Talk More Rock, I believe, is their worst record.
Interesting.
Yes, and I say that for a couple of reasons. I don't like the production.
Okay, because of the bass sound.
Yes, I think that if they were to record that record today, it would sound very, very differently.
Very different.
The songs are better than How to Clean Everything, but How to Clean Everything, it's kind of like Led Zeppelin 1. Clearly Led Zeppelin 1 is not like a better record than Physical Graffiti, yet it's probably a more important record, and therefore, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I have to say that it's the worst Propagandhi record, and the worst Propagandhi record is still 100 times better than, whatever. But like, I just couldn't wrap my head around that record when it came out. And then the records that came after it are just so good.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
What I have to say about that.
I mean, I love it. I love them all. And like people like, they really latched on to the fact that Keith and I said early on that How to Clean Everything and Let's Talk More Rock were like our least favorite records because we tend to skew a little bit more towards the later years.
Of course.
As far as our personal preferences.
Yeah.
And then people are like, oh, they don't even like How to Clean Everything. And I'm like, well, How to Clean Everything is my 7th favorite record of all time. And I'll give you 6 guesses what the other 6 are.
Yeah.
And so it just really cracks me up because I feel the same way. Like my least favorite Propagandhi record is still my 7th favorite record of all time.
What's the worst Propagandhi song?
Oh man.
Remember, when you started this podcast, weren't you guys going to rate them? Like
we do. Yeah, we do rate them. So I am not a huge fan of Showdown.
Stop it.
I'm not. Oh, really quick. In the 96 tour that you were at, they must have opened with the Chris only version of Showdown, right? Because they were opening that tour with Showdown without John's parts.
Incorrect.
No?
No.
Do you remember?
No, they didn't do that. Definitely not.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, so I'm not a super huge fan of Showdown, although I do think we did that song a little dirty in the episode. And I want to do a part 2. I don't like Ska Sucks, obviously. I'm not a huge Haile Selassie fan. I think that those are I'm not a huge fan of This Might Be Satire at all. I think This Might Be Satire might be arguably my least favorite. I'm going to get myself in a lot of trouble here if I keep running my mouth. So
yeah, but you have to do it, man. You have to do it.
I know. I'm just going to make everybody mad.
Just give everything 5 bags of popcorn every time.
Absolutely not. I totally agree.
I don't know if you get that reference or not, but
oh heavens. This is wonderful. Yeah. So those are kind of like I do think that Gifts and Anchorless don't fit. I do think that they're fantastic songs.
There's one John K. Samson song that I believe is the worst Propagandhi song, and it's this. What is it?
Letter of Resignation.
Leg Hold Trap. I think it might be Leg Hold Trap.
Okay, so Leg Hold Trap isn't a Propagandhi song; it's a cover of Toothpick Hercules, which was John K. Samson's previous band before Propagandhi when he was in high school. So
that explains that.
Yeah, so it wasn't actually a Propagandhi song. It was a Toothpick Hercules song. And interestingly, the singer from Toothpick Hercules, Dr. Conrad Sichler, was on this podcast on the Leg Hold Trap episode, and he tells the entire story of that song, but also working with John when they were in high school. And we talk about all of the songs on the unreleased Toothpick Hercules EP, of which I think that Leg Hold Trap is the worst song on the unreleased Toothpick Hercules EP. I think that every song on there is a lot better besides that. So that was kind of a very, very deep, weird rabbit hole that Conrad and I went down for that episode.
Yeah, it's a stinker.
It was... So that, that's how it goes for me. But I love John's redoings of those songs when he like performs solo. Like I think there's a version of John playing Gifts from Less Talk More Rock by himself on a live video from maybe about 5 years ago now.
Yes.
And it is perfection, absolute perfection.
Yeah. He was just
needed
in the wrong, like it,
Yeah.
you know, it was the wrong. Well, I mean, you know, it is what it is. It's like
Totally.
the Weaker Thans. It's like they're a great band, you know. They're kind of, it's more like a Sam I Am or like
Yeah.
I don't know. They're one of the they're kind of like Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan. It's like if Michael Jordan didn't exist, like, you know what I mean? Like the Weaker Thans are one of the great Canadian punk bands ever.
Totally.
But they're still kind of like, at least to people like me, they're maybe in Propaganda's shadow still, but like that's just me. Like I'm sure there's people who are into the Weaker Thans who don't know about Propaganda, maybe.
Unquestionably, that is completely true. There are people who could not care less about Propaganda to think that the Weaker Thans are the greatest band of all time. Unquestionably, those people are they're out there and they're numerous.
You know, just I don't know if there's any other tidbits that I can throw your way, but I mean, yeah. Any other questions for me about this era or anything else? I mean, like I can go on forever, but like I don't want this to be one of those 9-hour episodes.
Oh no, it won't be. Keith and I are probably going to do 30 minutes on this song, and then we'll keep it a short one
We've been talking for more than 30 minutes.
Oh no, that's totally fine. So if we wind up with an hour and a half long episode, I love it. But one of the things I do want to point out is that when you listed a bunch of hardcore bands earlier, you talked about tons of bands that are from the city that I live in, Buffalo.
Sure.
Were you like I'm just, you know, kind of interested tangentially. Were you involved in the Buffalo scene in those days at all? Did you come over here a lot?
So the kind of like the way it worked was that there was Detroit, Toronto, and Buffalo, and that was kind of like a triangle. I mean, the Buffalo, Hamilton, Syracuse was also kind of like a number of cities that kind of were connected. And, you know, this was what sounds like tough guy hardcore, you know, really fucking like metallic, like chugga hardcore.
Earth Crisis, no question.
But these guys were still like, I saw Earth Crisis in 1993, and these were like little kids, skinny kids. And, you know, his voice, he has got one of the most powerful voices in the history of hardcore. But like, you know, at the time, you know, these guys were not particularly intimidating. And even the guys in Chokehold at the time, you know, you see what they look like now, and, you know, beards and tattoos and, you know, like camouflage. But like at the time, they, you know, Scott Vogel in particular was like one of the guys who was just like lived and breathed and sweats hardcore, like
absolutely
in the best possible way. Like I saw a show in Buffalo, a band called Bloodlet, Chokehold, and then the band opening was Despair, which was a new band that Scott Vogel had just put together. And, you know, they didn't have any releases or anything. And they just fucking tore the place apart. Like, holy shit, they were good. And, you know, I gave Scott a shoulder 7-inch, and he gave me the Despair demo. And like, we listened to it in the car driving back to Canada, and we almost drove off the road. I mean, it was so good. And it's like, and, you know, the guy, Daryl from Snapcase, like he found me on Instagram because we both are like dads who like sell antiques. You know, we talk about like Eames chairs and like, can you identify this like sculpture? And, you know, it's just like, and again, it's like 30 years of this shit. And we're still like, there's this weird network of people who are just still involved in a weird way and like living your life in this way of doing things this way. It's very, I don't know, man. I'm just very, very lucky to have been at the right place at the right time to be able to be a part of that. But yes, the Buffalo scene was huge. There was a place called Home of the Hits. I don't know if it exists anymore.
It does not.
You know, there was like a few stores and labels there, but I was in Canada. You know, crossing the border was not fun. I will say.
Yeah.
Like we were turned back. My band would try and play in Detroit, and we were turned away. You know, granted, I was trying to cross the border with my library card, which was, you know, definitely suspect. But yeah, the Detroit scene though in particular was really, really like gnarly. You know, Buffalo still had a little bit of a there were like upper middle class kind of like areas where it was, you know, you can tell that Buffalo was a very affluent town 100 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But when we were playing in Detroit, it was just like burned out abandoned buildings, and it was, you know, a different scene for sure.
Yeah.
But anyway, man, like that was just what a glorious time to be involved in all this. Just letter writing, no internet, no cell phones, just fucking nonsense.
I love it. Well, Paul, I have absolutely loved this this chat. I'm glad that I was able to give you a platform for such a deep dive to go down memory lane. I am truly, truly hoping that in the coming weeks you're able to find that recording, because I would love to put snippets of it in the episode if it emerges. And if it doesn't emerge before then, and you do find it down the line and post it, I will definitely share it with the audience, because, you know, I love putting clips of old performances in this show, because it's just kind of a little bit of a documentary project, you know? So if that thing comes to light in the coming days, definitely keep me posted on that. But I'm really glad that you reached out, that you you know, managed to break through my you know, ridiculous schedule and say, hey, I have a really awesome story and I really think it would be awesome for the podcast. Please consider doing this, because
we're doing important work, man.
I love it. I mean, this is like, I latch on to the little things in life that give me joy. And even though my project is, you know, just like about a band and about music, and it might seem insignificant to some people in the world, like this matters a lot to me, and it just kind of gives me joy and something to kind of latch onto, and a habit to keep my brain ticking over as I careen towards middle age. So this has been a real fun conversation for a deep cut that is largely forgotten. And I would say that I'm, you know, pretty excited for this episode now, because it's a song that Keith and I have never really considered doing for an episode as yet, because you know, we hadn't found you yet. So you're the missing ingredient for the mutual friend episode, Paul.
Well, you know what they say, when the lights went down, it all came crashing back,
rushing back. Who knows? It's one of those.
Whatever that song is. All right, man.
It. Well, Paul,
I'll sign off by saying this in great words of my countryman Nardwar, the human serviette. Doot doodle doot doot. Boop boop.
All right. Thank you so much to Paul Bright. That was a fabulous conversation. Thanks again to Jesse Byars, the first cover that you heard. And coming out of that interview, you just heard another cover from a very obscure Relapse Records compilation from 2002 called Swedish Assault. And the band covering Propaganda there, I think the name is pronounced Acell. I did as much digging into Estelle as I possibly could, but very limited information exists about this band, except for that they put out music on 3 7-inches in addition to appearing on that compilation. And I even went so far as to like find the first name of the vocalist from Estelle and just start DMing people on Facebook in Sweden saying, "Are you the singer of Estelle who covered Mutual Friend by Propaganda?" And I got 0 replies.
Oh, man.
But I was just like DMing strangers on Facebook trying to find the actual vocalist for that band. But as far as I can tell, members of Estelle did not go on to do other things in music, and I was unsuccessful in tracking them down. But I did my best.
Yeah, that's so you, Greg. That's so funny. Relapse did a ton of assault comps like that. They had Polish assault, Brazilian assault, and Czech. And this one, I was not familiar with this band or the cover, and it was really good. It was a really, really awesome cover, and the rest of that compilation too is also great. Gadget, Birdflesh, Genocide Superstars, which is Mieszko from Nazem's kind of hardcore punk rock and roll band.
Nice.
So there's really good stuff on there too. And of course, Nazem covering Propaganda as well. It makes me wonder if there's just some connection or inspiration or influence from them doing so.
I think that a lot of those metal bands and hardcore and grindcore bands realize the Propaganda are pretty much kindred musical brethren. You know what I mean? Like, I kind of feel like they know that connection exists, which is why we see these connections, happening. And I personally love seeing when heavy bands cover Propaganda because, as you know, there's such a challenge within, metal and extreme music for very questionable personal views about the world. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like when a band who is like, a heavy band covers Propaganda, I feel like they're probably pretty decent people in their personal lives, and they don't hold extremely questionable beliefs about the world. So that's kind of a nice little indicator to me. Hey, this is a band that you can feel comfortable supporting because they're not going to extraordinarily disappoint you with their worldview. So that's just kind of a way that that's kind of like a little hallmark for me of like finding heavy bands. Like, do they know Propaganda?
Or they really don't understand English. And
that could happen too, for sure.
No, joking.
So let's get into this song. Keith, there are some clips from the 90s that I sent to you about Chris, explaining what this song means to the crowd. And I want to play these sort of like song explanation monologues in this episode right now. But the first one we have is in 1994 at 13th and Broadway in San Diego, California, from June 11th, 94. And is a really great live performance of this song and a very detailed introduction by Chris about the meaning of this song, which I think will set the stage for how I read these lyrics, because the lyrics for this song are extremely vague in a few very key moments for me. So let's have a glance at this clip here real quick.
Okay, I guess this is gonna be our last song, and it's about we're not by any stretch of the imagination a straight edge band, but I guess some aspects of my lifestyle reflect that. Because the song is about trying to make your actions consistent with the things you claim to believe in. And I wasn't doing that myself for a long time. I was supporting a lot of shitty corporations and giving them a lot of my money, buying beer and things like that. And it exhausted a huge capital base I could use for positive things, and also exhausted a lot of my time. And it's just something to think about. It's only a song about me. It's not talking down anybody. So it's just something to think about. If you're gonna drink, maybe brew it yourself, or just use microbreweries. Don't support shitty corporations. And just, besides the issue of there being animal products in a lot of, like cigarettes and beer, if that's a concern to you, I don't know, it might not be, but maybe it's something to think about. And try and do that in everything in life, try and minimize your participation. I mean, here we are driving around in a van, burning fossil fuels, stinking up the sky, but I guess you do what you can.
And, something that he's talking about is like, I feel like making actions consistent with beliefs is
Right.
a lifelong struggle, happy birthday recently, by the way.
Thank you.
But, now that the official Propaganda fan age is 38 and nothing but 38. So if you're not 38
Right.
out there, I'm just joking. But this is a very lifelong struggle, especially as the world becomes more and more overwhelming, and it gets easier and easier to want to shut down having our behaviors back up our worldviews is something that we should, that's a constant lifelong process. Does that make sense?
Oh, for sure. And that did not occupy as much as my mind and my thought processes in my 20s. When I was Chris's age and in that video, that wasn't something that really mattered to me much, even with the reminders from the band and even with the band talking about that for so long. I think almost having to come to it through age and, for a lack of a better word, maturity.
Yeah.
And just seeing the world differently, to understand how much I do struggle with that, and how I do want that to be aware of it. And I do want the struggle, but I want that struggle to be less, like we talked about with Potemkin.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's a couple more clips. So this next little clip that I'm going to play is from Chris at that infamous 1995 Gilman Street gig that we've sampled and referenced many times, where he and John and George are very mouthy to the crowd, which is, I get endless entertainment value from.
Yeah, my favorite is "Consider someone else, go vegan, or go fuck yourself" is the that stands out the most.
Yeah. So let's play a little bit of this thing from Chris in 95.
This will be our last song. As soon as we're done, you can talk.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and to you pro-American fuckers, thanks for your money.
Fucking Malinsky. Anyways, everyone's sucking back cigarettes or drinking corporate beer that they haven't looked at what the ingredients are on. You're fucking contributing a lot to the fucking terror and endurance of animals. And I hope you feel a little guilty about it.
Why do I deserve this ass in my face all night? Fuck.
Whoa, man. Holy. Whoa. What? Whoa? I can't hear you. My guitar's feeding back.
Oh.
Hey, you know what?
Nice hawk.
I find it hard taking criticism from somebody wearing a leather jacket. I'm sorry. Sorry. And spitting. Right on the contact. You apologize right now. How many times in your life do you get to stand in front of fucking, 200 crazy fucking nationalist freaks?
Listen, if all you're gonna do is generalize, call us all.
Obviously, I'm not generalizing. I'm talking about these people right up here spitting. Give me the finger. Well, don't be offended. If it's not you, then you're not the one I'm talking to, right? If you're not a nationalist. Hey, Janelle. Can we still stay at your house tonight?
There was nothing remotely romantic about it. You made me know something that's so genetic. So what was so goddamn important? Gonna dominate the show, each and every one of my convictions. Then
assured, mutually reassured of our consistency. You defend reject what the fuck is so subliminal animals firing torture? You will accept to them and then right now you don't call anymore.
See ya. Bye, thanks. You guys have been great.
We'll have a press conference tomorrow at 2. Yikes.
So in that clip, Chris is, that whole show, you really have to listen to the whole entire thing to appreciate how confrontational that show actually was. Not only was Chris dishing it out to the audience, but the audience was dishing it right back to Chris the entire time. And that rant sort of really speaks to me because Chris says, like, if I'm not talking about you, then don't be offended because you're already on like the right side of history, so to speak, is like what I think he's saying there. So if he's like critiquing like overarching things and you get offended by that, that means you see yourself within that overarching critique. So, people were getting very mad at him during the show, but he's like, well, if I'm not talking about you, then, don't be offended. But people get very defensive about social critique, but the purpose is to make people feel their complicity in the things that they participate in, which I think connects nicely to what he said in that 1994 video about, supporting alcohol industries who do questionable things. So
it's also really interesting, the difference in tone between the two in just a short period of time. I mean, it's just 2 years or so, or 1 year, just 1 year. And if it's partly that year, if it's also the crowd and what the people like, the atmosphere, the mood there, but it's like a completely different person. Because in the first, Chris is like, hey, and this is just about me. I'm not saying this about anybody else. This is just something, my own observation and something that I'm thinking of. And then the next one, it's just like, laying waste to everyone and everything in the audience that he can. And that just really stands out, that the difference of tone.
Yeah, and we got one more here. There's a 1996 performance in Kansas City, which contains an introduction where Chris describes the purpose of the song again, and it varies a tiny bit. And instead of alcohol specifically, which he seems to talk more about in the 1994 version, he takes aim at corporations who use animals. So we see that there's like a shifting or, wider ranging purpose that Chris feels about this song. So let's take a look at the 1996 one from Kansas City.
Okay, that was completely fucking ridiculous. But we have one more song. It's a short one. And again, it's not about political correctness. It's about extending courtesy to other creatures on this planet, other humans, other animals, and the rest of the fucking world. And so watching where we're putting our money. A lot of companies they exploit the workers. They use sexist advertising to sell us their bullshit, and they test their products on animals, and it's all just a bunch of shit, and we gotta stop it. Thanks for coming, and please think about stuff and visit the AK table in the back. Thanks a lot. I don't work here.
So I'm really happy that these multiple clips exist where Chris is sort of talking about this song in the 90s when this song was pretty current, because I feel like without these explanations, I may have had a harder time deciphering what Chris's intention was with this song, because there's not a lot of words. It's extremely short, and you can pick up on the notions of torture, union busting, sexism, things like that within the song, and animal confinement, of course. But like, these are like very big topics boiled down to an extraordinarily small song. So each one of those things is like a massive topic in and of itself. And I think that the song tries to do a whole lot in a very short amount of time, which is why I think I struggled with deciphering what it meant, because it's so big and it's so short. And so that's one of the things that I was really grateful to, that these 90s clips existed. So we have Mutual Friend is also track 15, like I said earlier, on Occupied Territory. So in this recording, Chris just says this is a song from the era of Silence Equals, the band featuring Derek Hogue, well known as the co-host for Escape Velocity Radio. But Silence Equals existed from 93 to 95. And among the Silence Equals recordings is the Systematic Destruction 7-inch compilation, which features Propaganda's Oka Everywhere acoustic version. So I want to play a little clip from that, because you can hear Chris stops the screaming vocal approach to this song and instead delivers it in the vocal delivery style that we come to know today. So here's a little clip of the 2003 version. All right. So Keith, what do you think this song is like, sort of like a sibling song in style to, with regards to other Propaganda music?
I guess musically, the only thing that comes to mind is, vocally, and the music is probably Rio de San Atlanta. Like with Chris on vocals, there aren't a whole lot of tracks that they've released that have like just a straight up hardcore punk feel. And that comes to mind when I hear this, which I've heard way less than Rio de San Atlanta, but yeah, that would be like the partner song. What about you? Anything a different song perhaps?
So I didn't really dig back into like the early demo tapes and stuff like that for this. So I wasn't I'm not really taking that into consideration off the top of my head here, but I was thinking about like putting this song on a playlist of like an album's worth of material.
Okay.
That sort of fits within the realm of this style. So if I was going to make a playlist with this song, it could be Mutual Friend, and then Incalculable Effects, Firestorm, My Ass, New Homes for Idle Hands, Bullshit Politicians, Super Bowl Patriot 36, Rio San Atlanta, The Days You Hate Yourself from the Failed States bonus tracks, Bullshit Politicians, Rattan Kane, and maybe even Letters to a Young Anus from Victory Lap. So that's kind of my like Chris and Todd kind of like Ragers mix. If I had to like put those two guys together to make a playlist, like that would be kind of like the album's worth of material that I think could be stylistically aligned and flow all the way through.
I like the including of Young Anus too, I guess stylistically in the later part of their discography, but also maybe if it fits into Chris's critique of himself in saying less or saying things differently.
That's kind of what the song Mutual Friend is about too. He's like looking at himself, and Letters to Young Anus, he's also looking at himself, but like 25 years later,
Right.
Interesting. Okay. So what do you have for guitars here? I tried to play this thing. I look up the tabs, and it's a very, very fast riff where he's just going, just kind of like going up and down, like nonstop. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's interesting given the reference in the San Diego 13th and Broadway clip when he says, we're not really a straight edge band in any way, because to me this just sounds like a Boston hardcore. From like the late 80s or early 90s, a Boston hardcore band. It's just fast. It's pissed off. It's pretty simple. thinking of everything else, the bass is pretty chunky and I think sounds good. I think the drums are killer.
Yeah, Jord.
Oh my gosh. Especially just about halfway through, which doesn't mean much, 20 seconds in. I really like the vocal style, and I kind of wish that Chris did this more, not just on Rio de San Atlanta and his over the top screams on the Only Good Fascist.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it really stands out. Maybe my biggest complaint with that isn't even how he sings. It's just how big the vocals are in the mix and how loud it is. But it's an oddball one in terms of just what the band has done consistently stylistically, but I think it's really good.
Yeah. To picture John K. Sampson as the bassist on this particular song. So I was listening to some John Sampson this morning when I was like just doing the dishes, and I was listening to Winter Wheat, one of his recent solo records, and like the first song is called Select All Delete, and it's such a calm, soothing, beautiful song. And then you put on Mutual Friend, and it's like, this is the same guy. So I was getting a big kick out of thinking about John K. Sampson playing bass on this song and thinking about how wild this song is, and then thinking about what John Sampson went on to do. And I just love the fact that when you're a musician, you never know where that journey is going to take you. You never know what the finished product is going to sound like. You never know about the range and diversity of sounds that you're going to create based on certain relationships of who is in the room with you, who is writing music. You never know where those journeys are going to take you. So, I mean, that's really amazing. But, speaking of Jord on this one, the ride cymbal under What Was So Goddamn Important.
Right.
Jord's like ding, 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 ding. And I'm just like, man, he is giving it on that ride cymbal. And I absolutely love that part. So I just got to give it up to Jord too, because that ride cymbal really makes this song for me,
Yeah, and you don't hear that a ton, right? Throughout Jord's drumming. And that's almost like the most iconic part of this song musically.
Absolutely. So we've got another cover before we talk about the lyrics. And I found this one on YouTube, and it was recorded in 2004 and it was recorded by a band from Spain. I hope I get the pronunciation right, but I think it's Ketchup. So I got in touch with a member of the band. I just commented on YouTube. If anybody goes on YouTube and finds this song, you can find me in all block caps. Is this your band? So they commented back, and they were like, yeah, put it in the episode. That's great. So I'm really excited about this, but they wanted me to let you know that there are a few other bands that members of Ketchup are playing in now. So I think it's Nitro Pollo and Hipus Atomicos. So you can find their comments on that, but there's a few other bands. But thank you so much to Ketchup for recording this song, Mutual Friend, and allowing me to put it in the episode. So here it is. All right. Thank you so much to Ketchup for allowing us to put that version in the episode. I appreciate you all. Keith, let's get into the lyrics here. What do you think?
Cool. Yeah. The first line says, there was nothing remotely romantic about it. No hand-me-down sob stories, nurtured or genetic. I guess given the rest of the song and what you've already commented on, Greg, my only thought here is that this reference is to, or in response to, some defense given by a friend when the person is confronted for their choices or actions, whether it's, like alcohol that was mentioned or something else that uses an animal product. So if a member of propaganda called out a friend for engaging in some activity, food or drink, that exploited the animals, the person didn't even have like a creative excuse for it. That their actions were just in direct conflict with other things that they perhaps had been saying. But that's my only thought, and I agree that it's not especially clear.
I love how you mention the defensiveness, how whenever somebody is doing something that they know is clearly wrong, but they're just like, meh, like, because changing takes effort and you have to, creating new habits is extraordinarily difficult. So if there's something you've been doing your entire life, changing that behavior is very, very difficult, even if you know that it's the wrong thing to do. So that's kind of like what I'm thinking here for this one. And then we have this next line. So what was so goddamn important that I felt I had to shelve each and every one of my convictions? Tell me what you think about this one.
Yeah, this is interesting because I think there's been a lot of debate in the last few years about straight up not talking to people, unfriending people for their political or social beliefs.
Yeah.
And just thinking back about that, I think it's important to mention that at least where we live, America is growing more geographically polarized. Like red zip codes are getting redder, blue zip codes are getting bluer. People are self-sorting, and of the nation's 3,143 counties, the number of super landslide counties where a presidential candidate won at least 80% of the vote has jumped from 6% in 2004 to 22% in 2020. So people are really moving toward others who think, right, similarly, at least in terms of political parties. And I saw a Harvard study that said their analysis of U.S. Census tract data showed that 98 to 99% of Americans live in areas segregated by partisanship.
Oh, man.
And most Democrats and Republicans now live in levels of partisan segregation that exceed what scholars of racial segregation consider high segregation. So that we are often even more segregated by beliefs, by political party and identity than even by race in the United States. And I bring this up because I think it's relevant, and I don't have answers. I don't know where someone should draw the line for this. I do think there should be probably a line of when, who you are willing to go out to dinner with, or the type of people you surround yourself with. But, despite the research that suggests humanizing those with different, habits or beliefs or political views, I do really believe that there are limits to that, as political views translate into actions, and actions impact actually what happens in the world.
Yeah.
Right. They don't exist in vacuums. I mean, they enable change, and oftentimes change that comes at the expense of, ordinary human beings who are trying to have better lives. So, in thinking about that, like, I'd hope a vegan would still want to be friends with me, despite the fact that I'm not a vegan. Just like I am still friends with people who eat meat.
Yeah.
But I don't want to be friends with anyone who believes in like race science, or celebrates the idea of a border wall or mass deportations, or actively spreads and shares anti-vax conspiracy theories, or enablers of false flag conspiracy theories, or people who bully survivors of school shootings. Like, I don't want to be friends with those people.
Yeah.
So I guess just thinking back to the lyric, so what was so goddamn important? Like, was this friendship, maybe this mutual friendship, maybe this connection that we didn't even really have, was that worth being silent on something that was more important? And it was more important to me before or when I say to me, to the band, to Chris or to whomever, was that mutual friendship more important to, say, Chris, than the conviction and the beliefs and the ideas that were around before that friend was, and certainly were around long after that friend was no longer there? And I don't have answers on how to where to draw the line or how to draw the line, and I think that's probably different from other people. But I don't still necessarily think I want to be friends with anybody. And with any beliefs, right?
Yeah, people are extraordinarily complex, and that's a decision that everybody has to make. And something that I was thinking about is like, I've come around in how I deal with conflict with diverse beliefs. So you mentioned like anti-vax conspiracy theories and actively sharing and spreading those things like on purpose. Whenever I see those kinds of things, I used to be like the person who would like research it into the ground and like rebut with like, 10 or 15 articles of like things that are very indecipherable to a lot of people in the world, but were based on hard science and things like that. But now I'm like, I take a much gentler approach. I'm like, I mean, like, I want to know, like, I say things like, oh, are you a doctor? Like, do you have like personal expertise in this area? And then if they say, no, I don't, then I say, well, I'm just choosing to get my information from people with, different areas of expertise. And then I just kind of move on with my day, and I just kind of like let it go.
Right.
And I found that that's been very good for helping me save my own sanity with regards to talking to people who have slightly different problematic beliefs. So like, that's kind of one of the things that I've chosen to do in a few spots where I have people in my life that actively do those things. And there have been times in my own life where I have not spoken to people that I was friends with or family members with for a long time because of a lot of the things that you listed.
Right.
And, the older I get, I soften a little bit. And I'm like, okay, I really want to be involved with some of these people in the world. But I really have a lot of struggles with how they go through the world. And so everything that you just said, I mean, I'm sure that you have experiences in those, because I know I do. And I know that a lot of people listening do as well, because humanity is so extraordinarily complex.
Right,
so this is not something that I have any kind of actual, psychology training or expertise in. It's just something that I've personally dealt with in my own life. And I've gone through the things of not talking to them to extraordinarily in-depth talking to them and pummeling them over the head with facts and information that's supposed to quote unquote change their minds. But to my knowledge, I've never succeeded in changing anybody's mind on anything. So that is something that I have dealt with a lot. And it's so frustrating and so exhausting. And I know you probably feel the same.
Yeah. I think, and family relationships probably more so than friendships. Sometimes encountering really dangerous and harmful ideas in my classroom, and I think the older I get, trying to evolve the way I interact with that, and not really settling just yet on what I think is probably the best way to do it, but at least maybe doing it better than I did 15 years ago.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I've never had to deal with the pain of having family members like invalidate my very existence. Like, there are absolutely circumstances where maybe some people who are listening to this have had people that were very close to them completely invalidate everything about their very existence and create an extraordinarily unsafe and untrustworthy situation, which required them to end those relationships entirely. And that is completely understandable. So I've never been like in a situation where I have felt unsafe in a relationship like that, to where my very identity was being questioned in every possible way. So that's definitely something that I have no experience in. So that's kind of where I'm very much on the fence here, because I realize that some relationships are so toxic and so unsafe that they must be ended. I don't have any personal experience with those kinds of relationships, though,
Yeah, same. I think
I just
for the
wanted
most part, same.
I just wanted to qualify that, that I have specific experiences and not others.
Yeah.
So then we have this next line: secured and mutually reassured of our consistency. And, the 13th and Broadway banter comes to mind as well. It sort of references like the cognitive dissonance. Does that make sense to you?
Right. Oh, yeah. This has me thinking too, because although I think lots of academics and critics of self-segregation along political lines, like I mentioned, they say it's harmful to only live near and to interact with people with similar social or political views. I mean, I get the sense here that Chris is saying that friendships can become like an echo chamber where people lie to each other in order to feel good, rather than calling each other out on their shit. And yeah, that 13th and Broadway song banter, I had that same reaction to cognitive dissonance, and perhaps it's just because it's what we most recently broke down with Potemkin City Limits, that Chris talks about minimizing your participation when introducing Mutual Friend at that show. So perhaps that friendship was more of a facade than it was actually rooted in honesty and improvement. And people wanted to feel like their actions were consistent with their beliefs and didn't actually want to be called out when they weren't.
Yeah. And then we had this line, but your defense rejects what you believe. So knowing what Chris says about this song in those 90s monologues, this is kind of another one of those vague lines for me. But to me, this speaks to the defensiveness of people when their contradictions are pointed out to their face.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, you told me you believe in this, but here you are doing this. And when you point those things out to people, the inherent defense mechanism, especially for men, in my view, kicks in, and they get very defensive. And it also speaks to the defensiveness between people when one person is doing one thing like drinking or eating burgers, while the other person chooses to not drink or not eat burgers. And the person who is doing the drinking or eating the burgers may think that the other person is silently judging them. So instead of wanting to feel judged, they may attack the person who is doing something differently. Because if you've ever been to like a party or something and you walk in, you don't want to drink, and somebody says, oh, here, have a beer. And you're like, no, the other person who is already drinking may think that you choosing not to drink may be judging them for what you're doing. When instead what they're actually doing is just making a personal choice that differs from what may be the majority norm behavior in that particular context. So a person making an alternative choice makes a person feel vulnerable and judged. So instead of being like, hey, cool, there's like this tendency to attack that which is different. It's a defense mechanism that kicks in to justify behaving in a way that makes them feel self-conscious around people who are doing something differently. And if you've ever made fun of, if you've ever been like made fun of for like passing on a beer or like eating a veggie burger or, the examples are so wide ranging. That only speaks to the insecurity of the other person as opposed to the person who passed on the drink. So if you're ever in that situation, you can use that as an opportunity to be like, oh, hey, this is totally fine with me. Like, you can do absolutely whatever you want, but tonight, because of my personal choice, I'm not doing this. So, you can address those situations with that person so that instead of having it become an issue that festers over time, you can just address it straight up and move on with your day. You know what I mean? That's kind of what I've done when I've been in those situations lately, when I've realized that I had the maturity to handle those situations. But when you're young, I mean, those situations are really hard to deal with because you feel a lot of social pressure in those situations.
Right. Yeah, Greg, I've been reflecting quite a bit on defensiveness, and not just what I've experienced from other people, but my own defensiveness as well. And, kind of related to the examples that you shared. Yeah, if I tell someone that I don't eat meat, I don't expect them to offer explanations to me why they can't be a vegetarian or why they do eat meat.
Yeah.
Like and I'm sure I do the same thing, in other situations, like, oh, well, I don't normally drink beers on the weekdays, or I don't have time to watch TV shows, rather than just kind of having a conversation and listening to what someone is doing or what they are experiencing themselves. So there
Yeah.
is this tendency to justify when I don't think a justification is demanded in the first place. But I'm guessing like the person in question, the mutual friend, just was saying one thing but doing something else, and in that case asking for an explanation doesn't seem to be unreasonable if their actions didn't line up with their beliefs. So to confront them, and how you do so, I think, is again person to person and with what you're comfortable with and what the confrontation is actually about. But that seems to be, maybe if we actually want to improve ourselves, can be a productive thing, perhaps, or can be a constructive thing. But I know I don't do it very much.
Yeah. And then we have this next line, which has several topics listed, but we'll take these kind of one at a time. But what the fuck is so sociable about animal confinement? So, in those song explanations by Chris, he frequently brings up how he was supporting some corporate alcohol brands, but then he mentions there being animal products in cigarettes and beer. And it got me curious on how this may have changed since he said that in 1994. Because a lot of things that were taken for granted in 1994 have been critiqued heavily and revised since then. So much has changed in the last 25, 26 years. So I found an article from 2020 called "Is Alcohol Vegan? A Complete Guide to Beer, Wine, and Spirits." And the article said there are around 5 million vegans in the US as of 2020, which was a pretty shocking statistic to me. Interestingly, alcohol companies aren't required to list their ingredients for beer, wine, and spirits, which I did not know. So, this was something that I was kind of intrigued by, about the debate of vegan versus non-vegan beer. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think a good example of that is Guinness, who only in 2015 announced that all of their beer would be vegan, that they would stop using animal products in the brewing and the refining of their beer.
That's so cool. So there's some other examples of vegan breweries. So some examples of some commercial beers and breweries that are vegan, according to this article that I found, are Budweiser and Bud Light, Coors and Coors Light, Corona Extra and Corona Light, Michelob Ultra, Miller Genuine Draft and Miller High Life, Heineken, Pabst Blue Ribbon, and then you mentioned Guinness Draft. So that's kind of cool. So those are some corporate brewing companies that all of their beers are vegan, which I thought was pretty cool. But then we have some non-vegan examples. So cask ales, which when I lived in the UK in 2009, 10, and 11, I drank tons of cask ales, had no idea that there were animal products of any kind in there. Cask ales are a traditional British brew that often use something called isinglass as a fining agent, which I had no idea what that meant. So I was pretty shocked to discover that all those beers I was drinking in 2009, 10, and 11 were not vegan.
Yeah, isinglass is the air bladder of a fish, usually sturgeon or cod, that is used in the process of brewing beer in order for the final product to have a clearer, less murky appearance.
Interesting.
It's literally fish parts. Yeah.
I had no idea what that meant. So that was brand new for me. Another one is honey beers. And this will be totally obvious to people who are practicing vegans, but some breweries use honey for added sweetness and flavor. And any beer with honey in the name is not vegan, because honey is not vegan because it's a bee product. So that was something that was new. So if you ever see honey something on a bottle, it's likely not. And then there's mead, which is a beer-like alcoholic beverage that is made by fermenting honey. So that's another example. So mead, if you're a mead drinker, it does contain animal products of some kind. And then there's milk stouts. And though vegan alternatives do exist, milk stouts usually contain whey or lactose in them. So those were a couple of things that I found regarding beer. But then there's vegan wine. So some wineries do use animal products like carmine for coloring, or isinglass, which you mentioned, and gelatin, and then something else called albumin. But then there's also casein used during processing. So all the same, plenty of vegan wine is available. And I discovered that yellowtail wine, white wine, is not vegan, but yellowtail red wine is vegan. So I highly recommend like looking into that, into some sources and just doing a quick search on that. But some wines from the following brands are not vegan. So some of these are questionable if you're doing the whole animal product free living. So Barefoot Wine, Apothic, Black Box Wines, Chateau Saint Michel, Franzia, those box wines, Sutter Homes, and Robert Mondavi. Most wines from those brands are not vegan. So definitely do a search for those if you're looking for it. But finding vegan friendly alcohol is very confusing, but there's a website called Barnivore. So it's Barnivore with a B, barnivore.com. They have cataloged over 55,000 alcohols as vegan friendly or not vegan friendly. So if you have a particular drink of choice, you can go to barnivore.com and you can search for your stuff. So that's just a couple of things that I've discovered in the last couple of days. But then we have the other topics here. Torture, union busting, sexism. So Chris is saying, what is so sociable? So you're talking about getting together with people and like having a good time, having a couple drinks, socializing. So what is so social about animal confinement, and then torture, union busting, and sexism? So the social aspect of this is so intriguing because what goes into the alcohol industry to enable us to cut loose on a Friday night? You know what I mean? Like, what is the process of making all this stuff that people like, I just need to have a couple of drinks tonight and chill out? What goes into that, putting those products into our hands? So, as I've mentioned on this podcast before, I'm interested in like religions of the world also. And on my other podcast, I interviewed Eric Repair, who is a really famous French chef who also happened to be best friends with Anthony Bourdain. And Repair owns a super high-end restaurant in New York City, but he's also a practicing Tibetan Buddhist. And a piece of the Eightfold Path of Buddhism is something called right livelihood, where you have a career and a profession that doesn't contribute to the suffering of other people and sentient beings in the world. So if you're a restaurateur, you likely sell dead animals and you likely sell alcohol. And the meat at restaurants feeds into a system that we've described so many times on this podcast here, but alcohol is a topic we've never really tackled. So I asked Repair, how do you reconcile serving alcohol to people within your Buddhist practice of right livelihood? Is it right livelihood to profit off of someone's possible alcoholism? And so I think about this a lot, specifically because of my interests. But that was a line that was an example of where I've actually asked somebody, how do you reconcile this belief with your practice? So that was something that I dealt with in some of my other work. And it was a really fascinating conversation.
So I'm curious what Repair said in response to that question.
He said that it's something that he thinks about all the time and that he didn't have a good answer for because he very much is aware of what his professed beliefs are versus the industry that he is a part of. And he said that it's something that he has been seeking to reconcile his whole life and that he's still in the process of doing that because he realizes the contradictions of his own existence. And I think that that's really important. Can we all as individuals recognize our own contradictions, recognizing when we do things that, in a perfect world, if we could live exactly how we wanted to all of the time, how that may be different than what we actually do. And, he's a celebrity chef with like a Netflix show and a very high end, restaurant that is like multiple Michelin stars. And I think that he is fully aware of the contradictions of his own profession and how those contradict with his beliefs. But I found that conversation to be absolutely fascinating. But he owned the contradiction clearly and blatantly, and he didn't fight back on that whenever I asked him that. So that was pretty cool. He answered acknowledging it, but didn't get defensive in his reply, which I thought was really a model for what anybody can do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So then we have this torture, union busting, sexism within the alcohol industry. And the sexism line particularly grabbed my attention because if you think about the alcohol industry, you would think about boys club for sure. You think about bar owners, you think about who would be running the show at a brewery in the alcohol industry. And, if I am honest with myself, I just immediately picture men. That's something that is built into me as a bias. And so I wanted to research this a little bit. And I found an article called "It's Time We Talk About Sexism in the Alcohol Industry" from a website called The Wine Enthusiast. And that article is awesome because it talks about women being slipped phone numbers at business meetings, being called sweetheart while sitting at the head of a table and being physically body blocked by walls of men at wine tasting events. So picture a beer festival. I know you go to some festivals sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is the accessibility physically for everybody in those events? Is there a wall of men that are just surrounding the tasting tables? Who can get through, who can't get through? So that was a lot that I was finding some articles with relation to that. But some changes are that the majority of all wine purchases for the home are made by women. So the Wine and Spirits Education Trust is something that, I was discovering a little bit about. It's an organization, but women made up about 10.6% of diploma graduates in the 1970s. And then today, Wine and Spirits Education Trust graduates, 42.8% are women. So in the University of California, Davis Department of Viticulture and Enology, 20 out of 35 people in the program are women. So there is a huge surge in who is studying and learning to be leaders within this industry. And women are really coming to the forefront as far as leaders within that. And that same article also asked men to do better, which reads, there's still a culture of complicity among men in the industry that needs to be combated. If women have a whisper network, then the male network is often even more hush-hush or worse, silent on these matters. And that's a problem when it comes to gender dynamics and harassing behaviors in the workplace, which for us is not only the office, but restaurants, bars, and wineries, among other places, let alone more serious infractions of assault. So the New York MTA was onto something when they coined the slogan, "If you see something, say something." So if you're a man in the alcohol industry and you see something that is sexist, the article written by women in the industry is asking men to openly call it out when they see it within their own industry. So if you're a part of that, be a part of the process of making the industry better for all people. So another source that I would recommend is about sexism in the craft beer industry on a podcast episode from the BBC called "Sexism in the Alcohol Industry." So if you search BBC sexism in the alcohol industry, you'll find an awesome 20-minute podcast episode from 2021. And it opened up with the head brewer at a craft brewery talking about how she regularly gets asked, quote unquote, "Do you even like beer?" And she's like, "I'm the head brewer of a brewery. Why are you asking me if I like beer?" So, men have this tendency to ask these intensely stupid questions. Why would you ask the head brewer of a brewery if you like beer? You know what I mean? If there isn't, talking down sexism involved in that. And, and to conclude that, I want to point out that there's a website called hopculture.com, which has an article called 77 Women-Led Breweries to Support Right Now. And I think that everybody out there should go and read that article, because you can find breweries that are in your town that are led by women owners and women head brewers, and are largely women teams of brewers. And those beers looked absolutely amazing. So go read that article, 77 women-led breweries to support right now, if you're looking to see what you can do on the hyper-local level in your own cities. And there's also a Guardian article, which is about the union part. So there's so much to this song. Like I said earlier, there are too many topics in this song.
Yeah, right.
And so, according to the Guardian, there's only 10.8% of Americans that belong to a union, which is half the rate of unionization in the year of my birth, 1983. And this got me wondering about who were some unionized alcohol companies. So listed beers are brewed by machinists, so the IAM, United Food and Commercial Workers, the UFCW, the UAW, Operating Engineers, the IUOE, and Teamsters. So these are some unionized breweries: Anheuser-Busch, Black Eye Ale, Black Hawk Stout, Blue Heron Pale, Boxer, Budweiser, Busch, Butte Creek Organic Collection, Carmel Wheat, Clear Creek Ice, Dundee Craft, Eye of the Hawk, Genesee Brewery here in New York, Goose Island, which I think you may know, Henry Weinhard's, Honey Amber Rose, Huber, Icehouse, Land Shark, Leinenkugel, and Milwaukee's Best. And the list goes on. There's so many that are union made. Old English 800, Pabst. I'm trying to think of what else here people might know. Red Tail Ale, Rolling Rock, Sam Adams, and more. So some unionized wines are, let's see, let me find my list here. Boone's Farm, Carlo Rossi, Chateau Ste. Michelle, Fairbanks, Franzia, Gallo, Robert Mondavi. So interestingly, some of those names I said earlier as being not vegan, but they are unionized. So there's like this multiple connections here,
Yeah, like everything, Greg, I think you've really clarified and explained, is that it requires research. I mean, everything requires our attention and research to understand not only what are we purchasing, but who are we supporting. And there's so many people out there talking about these things right now with great knowledge, experience, and detail, that it's easy to think of beer just being beer, and thinking it somehow exists in a vacuum, separate and isolated from the other harmful isms or beliefs that plague so much of the rest of society. But it's there with beer, just like everything else, unfortunately, that we enjoy, if it's video games, or the band merchandise we buy, or the food, or whatever else. And I think a good intro to this is there's an article called "Union Busting Ended My Love Affair with a Beer," and it specifically talks about Yuengling, who the author of the article says illegally broke up a union as it had petitioned for decertification, a decertification election to kick out the union from Yuengling when the contract of that union expired. Surly in Minnesota, which is a really well-known craft brewery, was criticized very similarly for attempting to bust up union efforts as they closed their beer hall just days after workers there said that they were going to attempt to unionize, and that ultimately failed. But I think paying attention to those things, and then being aware of what you're going to support, there's a lot of really helpful information. And I think also that with alcohol being so ubiquitous, with the rise of craft beer in the last 15 years, I think as I said, it's really easy to look at those industries without the critical lens that they might apply to other industries. I found something from Pete Brown, who wrote Craft, an Argument. And in that, he says, craft isn't just about the things we make, it's about the kind of people we are. And for this, we get to an unspoken assumption we may be reluctant to admit even to ourselves. We believe that makers and buyers of craft products are morally superior to other people. And I mean, just check out the book Beer and Racism, how beer became a white, how beer became white, why it matters, and the movement to change it. Founders, one of the most well-known breweries in the country, faced heavy criticism in 2018 when Tracy Evans, a Black employee, filed a lawsuit alleging that his co-workers used racial epithets in his presence. They used the N-word, that he was passed over for promotion, and that the brewery harbored a racist internal corporate culture. And it ended up blowing up, I think even just outside of craft beer, because there was video that leaked of a tap room manager from Founders, Dominic Ryan, who wouldn't even admit whether he knew if the employee, a former manager himself, was Black. He refused to acknowledge it and gave these like really terrible gaslighting responses to it. So, I mean, what do you do then when you realize that companies are not living up to these ideas that we project onto, these perceived different and special and unique items? Well, for me, I stopped buying it. Like if I read those stories or I discover those things, I pay attention as much as I can, and then I no longer buy beer from breweries with these questionable practices. I also recommend for those who are interested, Brianne Allen. You can find her on Instagram at Rat Magnet, and she stirred up the surface regarding sexism in craft beer a few years ago, just by asking, what sexist comments have you experienced? Like what experiences of misogyny and harm have you experienced within the craft beer industry? And it kind of exploded into the responses that she received, not just in the US, but in Europe as well, from servers to brewers to people who work in breweries in multiple ways, that really outed some of the biggest names within craft beer as again having really questionable or outright terrible practices. So then, well, what do we do about that? Well, we hopefully listen to people, and then we divest our money and support from those places, realizing it doesn't matter how good an IPA is if a place treats their employees terribly, if they want to bust up efforts for them to have greater access to benefits and pay through a union, or if they objectify people because of the employees are women, or they marginalize people because of the color of their skin. I don't buy beer from them anymore. So, this is, again, I hope to make the point that this is everywhere. I mean, this is, universities, this is public schools, this is, I'm sure, the fine dining and the restaurant world. I mean, this in sports, this happens everywhere. Yeah. And to assume it doesn't, I think is dangerous.
Yeah. And, the thing for me is, like, during the pandemic, I told you a little bit here and there that I sort of had a problem with like White Claw and Bud Light Seltzer. Mm-hmm. And so Chris making these comments on these videos has caused me to reflect a lot on where a lot of my money went for the last couple of years. And it's embarrassing to think about how much money I actually spent on, my weekly White Claw box. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's been amazing to repurpose how I use money to realize how I was only enhancing essentially my own suffering and my own physical decline by continuing to massively consume these things, which were terrible for me, but also, I was getting nothing but declining health with regards to giving my money to people who don't care about me.
Yeah.
So, and then we have this, this line, and isn't it strange how you don't call anymore? This is easily my favorite lyric of the song because it makes the most sense to me. This is a hard-hitting line because to me it shows Chris possibly losing friends over attempting to change his own behavior that his old friends just aren't on board with. And like these riffs, these personal friendship riffs, which can be caused by disagreements over any number of topics, like we've mentioned, cause grief, personal grief. I see this last line as being a grieving line for a relationship which has changed. But the form of loss is often hard to process because neither person is actually gone. You're both still there. You're just apart. You're not together. So I found some research by a professor named Pauline Boss from the University of Minnesota Family and Social Science Department, who calls this grieving an ambiguous loss. This is an unresolved loss where people are present but absent, whether physically or psychologically. And so if you're in a room with someone and you know there is a topic you vehemently disagree on, and you know that topic's mere mention will yield a conflict, it makes communication and feeling relaxed nearly impossible, which causes basically a total breakdown in communication, which leads to grieving the loss of a relationship with people who are alive. And then since this song is about trying to retrain one's own actions to align with a value, a person you may once have been close to, who you may have conflicts with, your newly held value may not be as easy to talk to anymore. And you or they gently or not so gently pull away over time. And it really sucks, but there are some actions that you can take if you find yourself in an ambiguous loss situation, such as acknowledging the grief, telling the person why you are grieving, so that they don't be like, oh, that person's just a jerk, then just ditched me. You have to, tell them why you are grieving. You have to let yourself mourn. You have to cherish the shared past. So it can be easy to reframe the relationship as like a total loss or time wasted, but relationships do come and go. And it's a part of your personal story. So even if you grow apart from somebody, it doesn't mean that you have to lose the love of the time that you were together, even though that relationship has changed. You can picture those times of hanging out with that person and let that hold a special place as a part of your story, even if it sort of has changed. And then there's also the, reminding yourself that your own views may change over time as well. So you may frustrate somebody in the future that may cause them to end a relationship with you. So if you become enraged by somebody's actions and you end a relationship, just remember that that will happen to you in the future also. So you may change your mind on any number of things in the future, which may cause people to end their relationships with you. So when you end them now, just remember that that will happen to you someday. You can also establish boundaries. Remember that even if you end a relationship on social media, it doesn't mean that the relationship is over in real life. So oftentimes we block people on social media or whatever, but somebody on social media is pretty different than talking to them in person. And then, if you remind yourself to create new hope about maybe keeping the door open, your views on things may change over time. Somebody else's views may change over time, and there may be a common ground truce somewhere in the future. So those are some things that I was thinking about losing friendship and why that's so painful, because it's this ambiguous loss, this ambiguous grieving that Pauline Boss from University of Minnesota talks about in her work, which I found to be really fascinating. So yeah, that's kind of where I am with that.
Yeah, I think really helpful tips and ideas to soak in when struggling with those things. But I will say that I think that last line is kind of sarcastic, that I hear it as just I'm willing to talk about animal confinement and union busting and racism and sexism.
Ooh,
and you're not.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm calling you out on that. Hey, I wonder why you don't call.
I love it.
That's how I see it there, because almost like, yeah, like being willing to cut the ties because of those things. But again, I think especially with the divisiveness and with how hard things can be to talk with others, family or friends, the tips that you gave, Greg, are super useful, and there are at least two that I'm thinking about, how I can apply in my own life. So thank you for sharing.
Nice. Well, we have a couple of YouTube comments here. One of them is most hardcore shit ever, which is cool. Another one said Chris needs to do more screaming songs, which I think that Chris of 2022 would like gulp and gasp at.
Right.
But there are a couple, Firestorm, My Ass, Nailing Descartes to the Wall, Rio de San Atlanta, Mutual Friend. So these do exist. But you mentioned that you even liked it a lot. So Chris has a fan of this vocal delivery for sure. Somebody else said the best propaganda song, which I totally disagree with in every conceivable way. But there are some people that says that this is their best song. Another one says, wish the rest of their music was this good, which blew my mind.
Yeah.
And then another one says the drummer's fucking killing it, which George,
all right, that one we'll agree with. Yeah.
George definitely killed it on this one. So, just as a walking away lesson for me, this is a great little reminder for me at a very particular time and place in my life where I carry on with my current alcohol-free living right now, which is just something that I need to do for me. I have absolutely no issue if people around me drink. I was at a get together the other day and there was plenty of drinking going on, and I drank my Athletic Brewing Co.
Nice.
NA Golden Ale, which was delicious. And if I consider how many White Claws or Trulies or Bud Light seltzers I drank during the pandemic, it really makes me cringe to think of like spending between $17 and $35 a week on that. And when I think about what I want to financially accomplish with my own future, like buying my own home, like those dollars that I spent on that stuff can't ever be recovered. But the lesson of knowing how much I spent will linger with me. And those dollars weren't a useful way for me to invest my resources. And I learned a lot from doing that. And when I think about what I was doing to my own body, how I was spending that money, how wasteful it was, how many cans I chucked in the recycling, and I have no idea if those cans actually get recycled, but I threw them in the recycling. But who the hell knows if we actually recycle stuff? Because I don't work in a processing plant. I don't see those things get recycled personally with my own eyes. What if my town just dumps it all in a landfill? How would I ever know? I feel lucky that I broke that little habit. And, I'm about 90 days alcohol free as of the recording of this, which is pretty sweet. The ways we all spend our money, all of us, is insanely problematic in so many ways. And I guarantee that basically everyone listening to this has money that goes to places they don't want to totally support, but do anyway. Me included. If I think about like getting a mortgage, I'm going to be getting a mortgage through a freaking bank, which I likely hate. That's an annoying truth about living in this society right now. Coming to grips with my own pain masking, burgeoning addiction was extremely productive for me because it allowed me to redirect those finances and savings to things for my kiddo. And now with fuel at basically record high prices, I'm doing my best to drive as little as possible as well. So those are a little bit of my takeaways as I'm walking away from this today.
Yeah, Greg, thank you for sharing. And I think about, I guess something a friend recently told me about polarities, about like the extremes, about going all in or being not in at all, and how often that can be harmful. I mean, depending on the context, whether it's paying attention to the news completely, right? You like pay attention to absolutely everything, and or ignoring it and not following along at all. And I think in this context with alcohol, for much of my 20s, mid 20s on to my 30s until now, it's been kind of all in, like money, time, effort, energy, tracking down, some limited beer spending more money than I need to on something just to have it, just to try it, just to share it, to say that it's in my Untapped, login, whatever. Right. The amount of the effort, time, energy, money, and resources, it is pretty overwhelming to reflect on that it's something that I do enjoy. I mean, I'm a beer drinker. I do like beer. I like the history of beer. I like the flavor. I mean, I drink it not to just, sometimes relax or whatever because of the flavor, but I also realize that I have been drinking in ways that is not just about the flavor, that it's more of a dependency, that it is leaning into it when I'm stressed, and that acknowledging that and not being defensive about it, I think it's taken me some time to admit that there are definitely some not good practices that I've put in place with beer, with alcohol, and just because it has a cool label or a cool name. And if my grandfather was an alcoholic drinking the cheapest beer and the cheapest vodka, but this is $20 a 4-pack and it has a cool name and label, it's really not that different. And in some ways is more harmful because it's just like you said, the money is going actively knowing that I could be spending money in ways that is more constructive, either for my family or for my community. So I guess I'm like aware, trying to find a balance with that. I've decided to just temporarily take a break from beer, at least to clear my head, to send what money I can to my host family in Ukraine, to reevaluate that to where I can come to a better, healthier relationship, and realizing that this is all industries, right? Like, do I do the same thing with the shampoo that I use? Am I aware of what's going into that, what animal products or what the business practices or environmental practices? I think all of that requires attention, and I know that can it can burn you out and it could be overwhelming, but I think there's just far more harm in not paying attention and not capitulating in a way just to say, well, this I won't care about. So I think self-care, whether that is acknowledging the habits that we have, whether it's alcohol or something else, some other substance, or buying too much of something or doing too much of something as a relief or as a distraction, finding better ways to take care of ourselves that don't come at a financial or medical cost, maybe isn't easy, because that's not what really has been modeled for us. I think now we see that in the news and we hear about it in classrooms, but it's not what like my family actively preached when I was younger. So it's kind of like, oh, I kind of have to restart and rethink this. Yeah. And again, and then, sorry, Greg,
you're good.
Even just thinking of that video, when I first saw that video of Chris talking about the alcohol, alcohol and like its impact. I think just remembering that everything impacts everything, right? Like everything impacts the world and someone or something else. And, that includes all of the things that we enjoy, not just, the things that we've selectively decided to not purchase or to abstain from.
Yeah. And I'm definitely not done drinking alcohol forever. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that I know that I can never drink again is hard seltzer. That is something that I learned about myself that is extraordinarily bad and very addictive. And I am never going to drink that stuff again. Mm-hmm. But I look forward one day to, partaking in some of those 77 women-led breweries.
That
awesome. I cited earlier. But it's just a constant learning process of being a human being and deciding what we want to invest our attention into. So I'm going to give this song a middle of the road 2.5 for my ranking. And what are you going to give it?
That's probably what I should, Greg, but I'm going to say a 3 just because it's an outlier track and it sounds so different from everything else that I really like this one a lot. So I'm going to say a 3.
Love it. Well, thank you everybody out there for listening. This has been our episode on Mutual Friend. Thank you again to Paul Bright. Thank you again to all the musicians who contributed music to this episode. And if you want to find us on social media, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at propagandipod. You can email us at propagandipod@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time.
There was nothing remotely romantic about it. No hand-me-down sob stories, there's no genetic. So what was so goddamn important? That I found the heavier shelf each and every one of my convictions. 6 years, mutually reassured of my consistency. Universe rejects what you believe. What the fuck is so sociable about animal conformity, torture, universal sexism, and this free town? You don't call it. There was nothing remotely romantic about it. No hand-me-down side stories, nurture genetics. So what was so goddamn important that I had to show and teach every one of my convictions? Secured and mutually reassured of our consistency, but your defense rejects what you leave. What the fuck is so sociable about animal confinement and torture, union busting, sexism, and isn't it strange how you don't call